Oh, now it's official. Now we're all on record. So I'm seeing in the participant list here a list of 8. So with those numbers, and I don't know who's actively on or not, feel free to make this more of a discussion than like a webinar type of presentation. I'd really like to just answer your questions actively as opposed to at the end. And I could learn from our discussion as well. So please feel free to jump in. What I am curious as we get started here is, so Dr. Friedman mentioned that he's a sociologist, and he said there's some English people on. So if you wouldn't mind either unmuting or putting in the chat what your backgrounds are or what departments you're in, so that'll give me some context for what I'm saying today.
Sabrina, I'll start.
Yeah.
I have a varied background. I have an undergraduate and master's degree in physical education. I have a master's in social work. I am a licensed clinical social worker. My doctorate is in medical humanities, which kind of pulls everything together.
Yeah, that's everything.
And
All of the above.
I have been a faculty department chair and a tenured faculty in a different institution for 30 years.
Okay. Wow. All right. So all of the above, right?
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Right. Everything.
That's right. And you oversee the college success course now? Is that what?
Yes,
Okay.
I have academic advising and transfer services. I have mental health and wellness and career services.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Sheila. And then I saw Allison, if you wouldn't mind sharing, the copious note taker.
I was glad that part didn't get on the video.
Oh, and I just put it on the video. I apologize.
But
it's recorded, so you don't need to
get front of the bus to your boss. So my background is K-12 prior to coming to higher ed, and the discipline within K-12 was special education. Mm-hmm. And I was, up until July 1st, the coordinator for our early childhood program at Hudson County. Okay. And I'm currently serving as the interim dean for social sciences. So I've taken on a new role for a semester.
Oh, that's exciting. Congratulations. Hopefully.
I'm learning every day.
That's right. That's right. Is there anybody else on the line that, let's see, that would like to pipe in, or feel free to put in the chat? Well, you could do that throughout. What I'm going to talk about today is specific to the college success courses at Brookdale, but some of these things are occurring within English courses and also within social science courses directly at the other institutions that I'll mention. So this is not just exclusive to college success or first year seminar type of curriculum. And I wanted to be a little bit broader in introducing that, just so that you understand that even though that's my context, that does not have to be the way that this sort of content is delivered, and it's not happening in the same way everywhere at the moment. Also, a little caveat for my my presentation title here. So I am going to talk about specifically some qualitative methods for social science research, but in saying that, I do recognize that social science research is not limited to these qualitative type of methods. And my background's in psychology, and I was very much interested in doing quantitative and empirical research when I was doing my psychological research. So I should have perhaps been more specific in my title, and I didn't want to leave that as an open-ended thing to note. But to give you a little bit of background of who I am, so I am Sabrina Matthews, obviously. My last name is pronounced funny, even though it's spelled that way. And I am currently at Brookdale Community College. I am a faculty member, and department chair for our College Success Department. We used to have the first year seminar. It was within our counseling department on the student affairs side of the house. But since I've come, it's become something that's on the academic affairs side of the house. And it is not out of counseling, but I do have a direct relationship with our counseling department, as well as with our career counseling department. So I am considered an academic unit within academic affairs. So that's somewhat unique. From what I understand within the state. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So my bachelor's degree is in psychology. I have a master's degree in higher ed administration, and my slogging through my dissertation currently, but my doctoral degree, hopefully, fingers crossed, will be in educational leadership from Rowan University. So if I stop doing presentations and start actually writing some of that dissertation, then I'll be in a better position. But that's who I am, and that's my context. I'm coming from this ed leadership background. I've been at Arizona State University, Montclair State University, Ocean County College, and now Brookdale. I'm also a guided pathways consultant with the National Register from Jobs for the Future that has done some national training for folks to be guided pathways coaches. And I've done coaching work at a number of different institutions, both within New Jersey and then also actually out in Arizona. So I went back out to the desert because I desperately missed it. So that's who I am. And let's get into the content here because I don't want to miss anything. But again, feel free to interrupt me with any questions you have. So just some broader context, so you get a little bit of my history. I've taught the first year seminar courses in their various forms ever since, I want to say it was 2007 perhaps when I started, maybe 2006. I'd have to go back and look, but I've taught this in its various forms as it has cycled through different trends for the course as well. But throughout the entire experience I've had in teaching college success seminar type of courses, these have really been my big goals for my students. So the first year seminar courses are meant to engage students in the institution, give them a sense of belonging, have them connect with the community, familiarize them with institutional resources. But I have always, even prior to really being involved with guided pathways, viewed my role as being somewhat beyond that. And maybe it's because I'm an abstract thinker and I like lofty goals, but I like to introduce students at some level to these concepts that are listed here. So metacognition and beginning to think more about how they think, thinking more critically, becoming critical thinkers, and trying to define critical thinking for them. Now, this is not an unusual topic for college success textbooks either, but I do find in speaking with students that oftentimes when you ask them, what does your instructor mean when they're asking you to think critically, they say, think harder. So sometimes we need to define that a little bit better. And I think that the College Success Seminar or first year seminars are a perfect opportunity to sort of pull the curtains and say, this is what your professor means by this, and this is how you can approach this, right? So those are some of my priorities, as well as these number 2 and number 3 here, decision making, goal setting, and planning. Those have always been goals for me with students, as well as being aware of their mindset and having a growth mindset. So coming out of Carol Dweck's literature, and then perseverance and grit, and less so teaching students about what perseverance and grit are, and more so helping them to recognize how they already have this. And you may have heard this when you logged on. I was talking to Dr. Freeman about it. Not just what they are, but how they can draw upon experiences when they've already persevered and translate that to an academic context. So when I have gone to different institutions to help them redevelop their college success curriculum, and then when I have been redeveloping and reframing my own curriculum, this is really my lofty goals for the course and for things that I'd like to introduce to my students. So the ethnographies of work program, which I'll talk about here in a moment, and using those research methods are sort of within this bigger context. And I'm finding that I can't click, so I'll need to use that. There we go. All right, so those are my big lofty goals, but what do students' goals tend to be? Well, so in asking them what they tend to be when they come into my class, or for college in general, oftentimes I'll hear these sorts of things. So I just want to learn some stuff. I'm here to get some knowledge, here to meet some people. And I hear that actually less so at the community college and more so when I was at the university. Here to get a degree, that's an obvious one. Here to get a job, and then here to make money. Now, I haven't cited my sources here, but it's the students anecdotally that have shared these thoughts with me, and I'm sure you hear the same from your students as well. And also, I wanted to point out this movie. If you've not seen it, Ivory Tower. It's a documentary, I think from 2010, 11-ish. You can download it from YouTube. And I've actually shown this documentary to my students. It also pulls back the curtain sort of on what college is all about and some of the struggles that universities and college administration has. in terms of navigating student debt and all of those type of issues. But in this documentary in particular, I wanted to mention they talk about deconstructing college, and they say that there's really three things that you get out of college, and those three things are knowledge, a network of people, a professional network, and then also a credential of recognized value. And so what some of the students that were interviewed in this documentary were attempting to do, or entrepreneurs, I should say, was create a different experience, an uncollege, if you are, that addresses those three outcomes as well. And those three outcomes that they were speaking about align with what we're hearing from students that they would like, right? So I'd like to keep all those things within the college context because that's where I'm employed. But so how do we get my lofty goals for where I'd love these students to be as people and as professionals to align with what students' goals are for college? And that's really some of the work, I think, of that introductory seminar, helping the students to see, yes, you're going to attain these things, but college is more than just this checklist of courses that you're seeing on this curriculum map that you have. It's more than just a task list of things to get done. It's a more connected experience. And I find that that is harder at the community college than at the university to achieve, especially for students that live at the university, because it's all a connected experience for them. That's what they're living. Now, obviously, this is not in a COVID context that I'm talking about now. But at the community college, more so, I've seen a lot of students who are just trying to get their coursework done, and they have a lot of other responsibilities that they're balancing at the same time. And they're not necessarily connecting their experiences to what they want to do down the road, or to, how it's impacting them as a person. So one of the big topics that I talk about, really it's two things. So when I look at all of those big goals that I had put on that prior PowerPoint slide, they all kind of distill down to one principle for me, and that's intentionality. And I keep coming back to that with my students, self-reflecting and intentionality. So being more intentional about the decisions that you make, being more intentional about thinking how you think about things, being more intentional in making your plans and setting your goals. So I constantly go back to that word. I hammer it, and the students, I think, get annoyed sometimes. But I try to, in the class, in addition to talking about intentionality, I try to help them understand some of this connected experience, and helping students understand transferable skills is a big part of that. So I talk about transferable skills very explicitly in the class, and I've done this even prior to adopting this ethnographies of work model. Checking my time here, I apologize. So one of the exercises that I use when talking about transferable skills is I have the students Google search what are the skills, the top 10 skills, or however many that employers are looking for. I have them list those, discuss them, and then I ask them things like communication skills, teamwork, etc. I ask them if they're getting those skills through working at, or through their college courses, and explicitly no, but when we start drilling down more and more, students start to see the parallels. And in fact, I pull up then the curriculum maps and have them look at where they are developing those transferable skills throughout their curriculum. So we look at the course descriptions, we talk about these sorts of things. And I try to help them see where they're going to be developing the transferable skills, but knowing that you're getting them is insufficient if you're not talking to the students about how to talk about these skills down the line. So we also talk about in the class how you can develop your ability to talk about your strengths in these particular areas. So not just, oh, I did group work in my sociology class and therefore I know how to work on a team, but being able to practice and develop the language to talk about those sorts of things in a job interview as well. So in thinking about transferable skills and in thinking about all these lofty goals that I have for students and trying to align what I want for them with what they want for themselves, I promptly drank a lot of coffee and took a nap. No, actually what I did was I started to think about what I studied in my master's program and then in my doctoral program about educational leadership and understanding college, not as this checklist of a curriculum, but more so as an organization and as an employer. And I started thinking about, how do students fit into this organization? Do they recognize where they fit into this organization? And if the model is thinking of students as being customers, they may not recognize that it's beyond that transaction, but that they're active members in this organization. So what we started doing is discussing in the class some of those challenges and opportunities that colleges face, like the financial aid crisis sort of things that are mentioned in that Ivory Tower documentary that I recommended. But I started to have them sort of observe what type of jobs are at the college. What are people in these different jobs doing? What are their experiences? And looking at their, you know what I'm thinking right now? I need to pause myself for a second, because I remember being in elementary school and running into a teacher like at a grocery store and realizing like that's not right. Like they're a real person. I thought this person like lived in their classroom. So I didn't realize that they had a life outside of, you know, being that teacher. So recognizing your teacher or your professor as being a real person that's also part of this organization. Those are some of the discussions that we've started to have in this class as well. So the College of Six, I'm going to back up now and talk about where are some of these big lofty discussions happening, where is this work happening. So College Success Seminars, it sounds like most of you on this line are already familiar with them. They started in some form in the 1970s at University of South Carolina with John Gardner. There's been different forms and trends. Usually the courses are between 1 and 3 credits. Brookdale in particular offers a 1-credit course, which is an introductory course for students who are decided about their major. We also have a 2-credit course, which I don't oversee, which is specific for students in health sciences. And then we have a 3-credit course, which is our College Success Seminar course that addresses these ethnographies of work discussions. I teach both the 1-credit and the 3-credit course, but the 3-credit course was the one that I developed for Brookdale. There are different types of formats for college success courses. So some of them have a career focus, some of them have a focus on introducing students to their particular major that they're going into. So usually they're, if you'll allow me, usually they're like a sexy topic for that particular major to get students excited about some particular aspect of whatever it is that they're going to be studying. And I know that at least the last time I spoke with them, Stockton University had been doing that, like some sort of exciting aspect of this larger discipline to get students engaged in that discipline so that they know what they're building towards as they're doing their introductory coursework. And I think that's an interesting model as well. So as I've been teaching these college success courses, the Guided Pathways movement has come along, and there's really the focus on academic completion. I know I heard this morning at least that you all are in Achieving the Dream School. And so you're familiar with this focus on the completion agenda and helping students really align what it is that they're completing in college with their career planning for the future. And that has been really consistent. The Guided Pathways movement and how that's reframing college success courses has been really consistent with my interest with this course, with decision making and being more intentional. So college success at Brookdale, I gave you a bit of a context. And if you're not familiar with your neighbor down south, we, like you, are a community college in New Jersey. We're in Monmouth County, and there's our approximate enrollment. It sounds like you, we only have for this particular fall some of our courses that cannot be delivered online in person. So we have, you know, culinary in person, auto tech in person, but otherwise the rest of us are online, including myself. So I'm getting used to looking at my face. Thank you, Allison. I see your face too. I need more faces. But anyway, that's Brookdale. But I've also, I put here specific to the course, the CSSC, that's our College Success Seminar course, the learning outcomes in this class. So these are the learning outcomes that existed for this course as I built it a couple of years ago before we adopted this ethnographies of work model. We have not changed these learning outcomes. And in fact, if any of you were a part of the conversation at a statewide level, and I want to say this was maybe 5 years ago, led by Christine Harrington when she was at the council, you would recognize these learning outcomes. So 4 or 5 years ago when this occurred, the folks that were leading College Success Seminar or first year seminar courses statewide came together. I was actually at Ocean County College at that time. And leading the program there. So we all came together and brainstormed the things that we thought would ideally be the learning outcomes for this course, the major type of signature assignments that would be maybe across the board for this course. And some of the thinking was that perhaps this course could become part of the core curriculum or general education requirements on a statewide level. Now that didn't materialize, although I know it was part of the conversation, and some of that had to do with the 60 credit limitation that came down the line. But that said, that's where my learning outcomes here came from. So they came from a statewide discussion. And the focus here, these are not necessarily in order, but the focus here was really on the last two. So creating academic and career plans and then reflecting on values, goals, and decision making. That's really my focus in the course. But I do still talk about some of those study skills, test-taking skills, note-taking skills, those sorts of things that are typically covered in this course. And also I know in like the ALP section of English courses as well, if we have English people on the line here. So we do still talk about those, but I talk about them in an applied context and I apply them to career-related issues. So the CSSC course that I teach, I also wanted to mention this. I already mentioned that we're on the academic side of the house, but I'm also the only tenure track faculty member in my part of the institution. So we're divided into institutes and we have social science and humanities. Counseling is part of the student affairs side of the house, I said. We also have STEM, we also have health sciences, but I'm within our innovation and learning resources area. So the only other tenure track faculty members on my side of the house are our librarians, our faculty librarians. So I'm in what's considered a bit of a Switzerland, meant to be sort of neutral positioning, but sort of home to nowhere. And that has been really interesting for developing and rolling out this course. So an original goal before that 60 credit limitation was to have this course be required for all of our disciplines, sort of in keeping with what the guided pathways goals were. But when the 60 credit piece came down the line, some of those dreams were dashed a little bit because it was hard to see where this particular content as a course would fit into each one of the disciplines. That doesn't mean, however, that the content wouldn't fit into curriculum within another discipline. And I'll address that when I get into the ethnographies here in a moment. But where we fit in is in particular with our undecided students. So prior to coming to Brookdale, prior to when I came to Brookdale, we did not have an option on our electronic application system, which is the only way we accept applications, for students to choose undecided. And the reason for that was obviously because of the financial aid that they need to be in a program. So what we ended up doing was realizing I had done a program review for our liberal arts program. So that's our AA sort of general program, and realizing that that's the largest umbrella of all of our students and we know very little about them. And looking at where they transfer and what they transfer into, I was seeing that the majority of them, even though this was a humanities-based program, their courses in their major are predominantly humanities, most of them didn't go into the humanities. Most of these liberal arts students were going into social science or business and some into STEM and health sciences. And I found that to be rather telling about how this major, the liberal arts major, was being used at our institution. And I say used because I used to be an academic advisor myself. And I recognize how academic advisors help students plug into the institution to meet their particular goals. And sometimes this degree program can help students who never really make a decision to complete a degree. And also whether that's how they come into the institution, or maybe you have somebody that's just been lingering for a really long time and you look at all their courses and say, guess what, I can put you in the most general one and get you on your way, right? But that doesn't mean that the students really have a path. And we really didn't, as an institution, understand who these students were and what their own intentions were in this major. So we allow the students to select undecided on their application, and they automatically were defaulted into the liberal arts major, but with a cohort tag. So we use DataTel, our colleague system. They have a cohort tag as being undecided. I don't know what you all use if you tag your undecided students in some way, but we used, I believe, the same or a similar field to how you would tag an EOF student for the purpose of data collection.
Let me just jump in there,
Yeah.
Sabrina. This is a conversation that my area has had quite a bit of a discussion about. We do not have an undeclared major, and they are all over the place. Generally, they'll end up in liberal arts, but then what we also find is, as the drop-down menu in the online application, sometimes they all go to accounting because it's the first major.
Yeah.
But yes, and I do think it is a major problem that we really need to look at where they're going, what they think they're doing, how they're choosing majors. And I am glad to see this here today because I just had a discussion before I came on with our career director we have to deal with career first.
Yeah.
Before they can do anything.
Mhm.
I agree. Yeah.
And Sheila, I think that was a great question, was do we look at where the liberal arts generals are transferring to after they graduate? Because I think that's a really good point that Sabrina brought out, that it'll give us that kind of instant feedback, like where are they going?
I think that's something, Allison, that we really have to look at, and I'm hoping that through Achieving the Dream, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of that data because of the transitioning from when Becky did leave and she was transfer, and then transfer actually is in both sides of the house. It was in academics under Chris Wall, and the actual doing it is under my area, but there was no consistency there. So these are things that we need to really look at and make sure that we can provide for these students for where they want to go. In some areas, it's much easier than others.
And I don't think that having students graduate in a liberal arts major is a bad thing, even if they go into some of these other programs, particularly if the general degree program allows the student to select courses that are more aligned with their intended transfer institution, particularly if they're looking to transfer out of state. But from a data-driven perspective, like from my perspective in doing this program evaluation for those students, and then and trying to figure out what our students need, being able to find a way to tag them as self-identified undecided students was super helpful. We can track them.
I think though, sometimes when they have too many choices, they get too broad in their choices, and they've kind of wasted a little bit, even though it's nice to have a variety of things. It kind of, they lose time later because if they decide they want to be teachers, that's very specific, or whatever, it's very specific in some areas like STEM. So,
well, and that speaks to the pathing goals of guided pathways as well. So I forget if that was pillar 1 or pillar 2 or one of those pillars, but I found my place, my Switzerland place, with these undecided students. So the students that come in as undecided are directed towards my course, and then my course actually will count as an elective for any of the other programs, and the 1 credit one does as well. For any of the other programs, it counts as a 3 credit elective. But if students stay in liberal arts, it counts as one of what we call career studies courses, or one of the courses towards the major. So it fits into that liberal arts program, even if they decide to stay in that. So it's counting as a course towards their major. It's not required of students, but they are directed towards it. So just so you have an understanding of where this class kind of fits into the institution, because I found this to be kind of unique in that first-year seminar courses are typically for students who are they're required for students in particular cohorts like EOF, maybe, or with double remediation or those sorts of programs. And I haven't seen it as much with undecided students. So to give you an idea also of where I'm coming from and the type of students that I'm working with, I'm primarily teaching students who are undecided about their path. And similar to how we would work backwards from, backwards curriculum design, how we'd work backwards from our learning outcomes to build out our assignments and our pedagogy, I find it's very useful to help students to understand that sort of backwards thinking as well. And ultimately, that's what all of us are doing when we talk about career, like where do you sort of see yourself, but less so in the traditional career exploration. Look something up on the occupational outlook handbook and tell me about the daily activities of that. Less so in that way, and more so from that transferable skills perspective. Who do you want to be as a professional? What do you want your skills to look like? Like, where do you see your strengths? And then what professions happen to align with those strengths, as opposed to, I want to be a lawyer and XYZ is how I work backwards from being a lawyer. So it's more about where do you picture yourself fitting in to an organization? And do you want to be a leader? Do you want, what's the work you picture yourself doing? And in order to have an understanding of what their professional identity might look like down the road, they also need to have some sort of understanding of the social context of work. And so we start then with talking about the college as an example employer. And what I find really interesting is most of the student, and I wonder if this is one of my slides here, but most of the students that I've talked to in these classes have shared that they do have some parents that are in teaching jobs. Some will have a doctor here and there, a lot of nursing professions, but otherwise they don't have a whole lot of experience with parents or obviously themselves in a professional workplace context. So helping them see the college as a professional workplace context and as an employer helps them to also picture employment somewhat differently. And one of the reasons why they might want to picture employment somewhat differently, and this came up in some focus groups that we did in my classes, and I'm jumping ahead of myself here terribly, but that's okay. My undecided students in the focus groups that I conducted alongside Nancy Hoffman at JFF, and then Mary Gata came from CUNY to talk to my students as well, was that students were indicating that they were undecided, partially because their parents come home from work and complain about what they do. And students were indicating that they don't want to be stuck. They don't want to feel stuck because they see their parents feeling stuck. And they feel like if they pick a major now, that they're committing to something that they're going to do the rest of their lives, and they're going to be stuck like their parents. And if they're not understanding a professional context and they're not understanding these transferable skills and how your professional identity can translate between multiple careers or multiple workplaces, then they're not going to understand that deciding something now is okay. that doesn't necessarily mean that you're ever going to be stuck, that this is a continual, growth that you're having throughout your life as you're networking with people. And so we talk about professional networking as well. And as you're deciding the things that interest you, I mean, my goodness, I even share with them, I tend to whiteboard this when I'm in person, all the different jobs I've had and how those jobs have, like how I've moved from the one job to the other, or who has influenced me, or what my focus is along the way, and how where I started is not necessarily where I saw myself ending up. In particular, because I had quite a fear of public speaking, and I would freeze up over public speaking. And a lot of, I mean, teaching essentially is public speaking in the same way that it would have freaked me out before, let alone speaking to an orientation group or, some of the other activities that I've done. So something that I didn't even view as being one of my strengths and that caused me a lot of anxiety, and I'm vulnerable with my students, I share that with them, is someplace where I ended up. And how did that happen? So it opens up some doors and opens up some thinking for the students to kind of frame the course in this way. I want to make sure that I talk all over myself. These poor people watching the recording. Hi. All right, so I do want to talk in particular about the Ethnographies of Work program, because I know that you have an understanding of college success seminars in general, but I want to speak specifically to this program and then as Brookdale has adopted it, so I can get to some of the more practical matters here. So CUNY Gutman, the community college for CUNY, located by Brant Park. I don't know if you've spoken with anybody, if any of you have spoken with anybody from there. But Gutman is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a relatively new institution. They were able to sort of like design and incubate like the ideal institution according to some of the current education trends, which I'm a little envious of. And part of their incubation was this Ethnographies of Work program. So the person that runs this program, and they do have different people teaching it, but the person that runs it is Dr. Mary Gata. I work with her closely. She is an anthropologist. That's her background by trade. And she actually lives in Monmouth County, so she's close to Brookdale, which is kind of a benefit for me. But the Ethnographies of Work program there is a 2-semester sequence, and both of the courses are 3 credits each. And what the Ethnographies of Program course does is it situates the professional identity that students are exploring and these ideas of what is work, what is career within a social justice context. So they're looking at issues of stereotypes, gender identity in the workplace, what it means to be a woman in leadership and how that's interpreted. And they're doing this in their first 2 semesters. Regardless of what their major is, it's required of all the students. So I thought that this program was really, really cool. So what I did is I went up to observe actually her students' final presentations in one of the sections, got lost trying to find Brant Park. What an embarrassment. But I observed the student presentations, had an opportunity to speak with her students, and I was just so impressed what they did as teams, in addition to doing all this pre-research about the workplaces and workplace issues, as I just mentioned some of them, is they went in and observed a workplace, and they developed relationships with the human, CUNY developed relationships with some human resources organizations so that their students could be sent out and do this observational work or ethnographic research. So part of this course is teaching students autoethnography, so looking at themselves and talking about what their self-reflections of their experiences are, which is not much different from reflective journaling type of work that we would do typically in a college success seminar course anyway. But it talks specifically about ethnographical research methods. And there is a textbook that just came out for this summer from CUNY Gutman. That's an OER textbook that uses it's an online platform. I have it actually at the end of my presentation, so you can click on it and link to it. But it talks about the research methods in a lot more detail than what I go into in my class. So I talk about observation and research as something that's very accessible and perhaps less rigorous than what might be taught in a social science classroom. In the ethnographies of work class at Gutman, they do actually talk about it in a little bit more of a rigorous format. So they are teaching students to be researchers, which I think is aspirational. And the chapters that they have in their textbook speak to this. But so I observed their curriculum and tried to see where does this fit into what I'm trying to do with my students to have them be more intentional, self-reflect, develop these academic and career plans. And I was able to plug that in. I think it's on my next slide, in several different ways, including a workplace visit. So I partnered with our career services office, and they arranged a field trip, and we had to drive our own buses to different Monmouth County employers. It was not by major, because again, I'm working with predominantly undecided students. So my entire class went to, let's say, a public relations firm, or my entire class went to a law firm. And we didn't talk specifically about what to do to become a lawyer, like you might expect in some of the career services like lunch and learns that you could have, or informational interviews that you might do. But we more so talked about the specifics of that professional workplace. I don't know if any of you have been down to Monmouth County. There's Bell Works that used to be Bell Labs, but Bell Works has become this almost like a mall facility, a whole bunch of different types of really cool workplaces. And students don't realize that this is what office work can look like, and it's in their own backyards, and it's much more accessible. So even just going to these workplaces was really exciting for them, and they could see work in a different way. So as I began to adopt some of these things and develop this relationship with Mary, which is available to Hudson as well, she and Nancy Hoffman from JFF came and did a number of focus groups in my classes, and I shared some of those findings with you. But we're still working through some of the things that we found about how students think about jobs. We have a lot less diversity at Brookdale in terms of racial and ethnic diversity than CUNY Gutman does. So we are a particularly interesting site for them to come and do some of the focus groups, because we have students coming from occasionally much more privileged backgrounds than what they see at Gutman. And that has been adding a little bit of a different sort of texture to what will hopefully be a white paper down the road with JFF. But we've had an opportunity to do these focus groups and try to do some immediate response to the research that we're doing to grow this class in a different way than is typical for college success seminar courses. Because keep in mind, and I know I'm coming up so close to my time here, holy moly, keep in mind that usually college success seminar courses are only assessed and evaluated on their impact on students' persistence and retention, and possibly GPA, right? But are less often evaluated for their success like other courses at the institution, like based off of whether or not students are meeting the learning outcomes, or some of these other forms of assessment, like these focus groups that we're doing. So I think it's really cool that we're going beyond, looking at retention rates and the impact of the course on retention, or even college completion, to look at how students are meeting these learning outcomes specifically. And we're doing some of that work in these focus groups. There's also a professional learning community for the ethnographies of work institutions. We've got JFF there. I put these at the bottom here. It's CUNY Gutman leads it. Nashua and Great Bay community colleges are doing this work. I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, Nashua and Great Bay have the ethnographies of work situated within their social science courses or English courses. I don't recall offhand, but I don't think that it was a college success format. I believe from my recollection and speaking with them that it was embedded within a different course. I actually want to say English now that I'm talking about it. Bunker Hill is involved with this as well, and then Brookdale. And as I had shared at the beginning of this presentation in my conversation, casual conversation, Raritan Valley jumped on a group conversation with our professional learning community as well. So if that's something that interests you all, you know, I'm happy to make that connection for you.
Can I hop in for a second, Sheila?
Absolutely.
Have they ever looked at doing college success partnered with a college class? Because it would feed off of each other. I think it's kind of.
That's a conversation that I have had, and I've actually taught that version embedded into a particular major, plus also using it with advisement, registration, and English, so that everything was dovetailed in together. I keep talking about it, but I think maybe it needs to come more, Allison, from the academic side of the house to buy into it. And I'm ready and willing to work on anything that we think could work well. We had talked about doing our version of CSS and putting it with, and CSS is our version of this class right now. And eventually it is supposed to go over to the academic side of the house so that we have more ability to move. I have always thought that within the students' area, the meta major that they've chosen, that the CSS should be embedded into that meta major so they can get a great idea of what's going on. I do like the idea, though, of having a singular one for those who are undecided.
Yeah, because I think Sabrina makes a good point that they kind of, to me, college success is, the class is kind of in its own little bubble. Like it lives by itself. It doesn't
put too much stuff in it.
Something.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, it's not concrete to the students, I don't feel. And then if it were attached to, now I'm bringing Jenny Bobea into the conversation because this isn't my area. So, you know, Jenny, you can reach out to her. But
Yeah.
But like the comp class, or something that's like everybody has to take one of those gen ed classes that everybody's got, or like the intro to psych, or is Patrick Moore on the call? He'll get mad at me.
I've also had the conversation with Heather over, as we look to redo these things, how are you going to fit it in the new 60 credit curriculum? So something that we have to look at. So we've had some conversation, it just hasn't gotten any traction. And maybe, Sabrina, this will push it through.
Yeah, I think that's
interesting. Get us talking about it.
And beyond the limitations of our time today, I'm happy to continue a conversation with you if you'd like, because I've been navigating these similar things both at Ocean and now at Brookdale, and I was involved with Cumberland and some other schools as well as they were trying to work on this when Cumberland existed. But I find too that there's some there can be some resistance to the college success seminar, or some people can blow it off, and that may be students or faculty or even administrators. Some people are not a fan of this because it's not deemed as being something that's rigorous. And we know, those of us that teach this or that look at the data nationally, that this course really does have an impact. And I think that this ethnographies of work model, where you're teaching students to be conscious and intentional observers of their world and of workplaces, adds a little bit more academic rigor to the class. Actually, in some cases, I mean, it goes well beyond a scavenger hunt, right? So you can see more where it would fit into a meta major curriculum if it's something that that has a little bit more rigor than a traditional lecture seminar. So we have another session shortly after this. I'll continue through my slides here quickly, but like I said, I'm available. So if you want to speak further about this, or connect you to the professional learning community as well, I'm happy to do that.
Right. And just to let you know, we're happy to bring Sabrina back in anytime. I know under faculty and staff development, I'm sure under Paula Roberson's area. And like you were saying, Dr. Dinan and Dr. Wakefield, both of you were talking about how there's already been conversations going on. Actually, Sabrina was scheduled to come in the spring semester, but we had some challenges with dates matching up.
Yeah. And I was even at Bergen doing a program review for their liberal arts program, and this was part of the conversation that we had there as well. And with some, I was speaking to some very resistant faculty. I think it was from their STEM program at the time, even though. What was their VP? I can't remember. He's not there anymore. Bill, I think was his name. He was really in support of this, but it was really hard to get this course placed into some of these programs because they view it as a fluff course, right? But it's really not a fluff course. And when we can look at the national data, that says one thing, but everybody says, oh, my students are different, right? So that's the things that you hear. But I think when you look at this course from this ethnographies of work angle, I mean, this has really made a difference for me and how I speak about this course, even to my colleagues, because they're picturing the scavenger hunt. They're picturing the library talk. They're picturing those sorts of things. They're not picturing these type of in-depth conversations that we're having with the students where they come to understand themselves and the institution and the world of work in a different way. I'm going to rapid fire flip through some slides here just because I want to show you what I have in this presentation, and I'll share the PowerPoint obviously as well, so that you have beyond this recording some of the things that I had intended to cover. So in terms of teaching students to be researchers in a first-year course, that may sound like a heavy lift. CUNY is doing it a lot better than I am, but I'm also teaching, a little bit more broadly in terms of topics than they are at the moment. But these are the practical things that we're doing. So we discussed sort of like that KWOL model of what do I already know about this thing? So what are their beliefs about the topic already, the particular workplace issue that we're looking at, or their beliefs about college, if we're looking at college as a workplace, or their beliefs about what a law firm might look like very, very tangible sort of conversation. We do some initial observations in a templated field notes documents that I give them. We begin to formulate some questions. We call them research questions by doing a little bit of library research, or if we're talking about the particular workplace where we're going to go as a group. We do that by looking at their website, for example. And then we start to have a little bit of a conversation about understanding themes. Now, this is a more heavy lift. It can be a little bit more abstract, but I talk about themes like you might think of coding, right, when you actually get the data. But I talk about themes in terms of this hashtag is intentional. Twitter. Thank you, Allison. Because they're familiar with Twitter and hashtags and hashtagging things to identify main ideas and issues that are interrelated. So I have a whole conversation with my students about hashtags and how they relate to this idea of themes, and it has made it a little bit more accessible for them to understand it in that context. We then talk about specifically observing to answer the questions that we've asked, and then we talk about reflecting on what you've observed and what your impact may have been, the observer bias, Hawthorne effect, those sorts of things. I'm going to flip through here very quickly. These are some example slides from some of the lectures on this topic. So we talk about the different types of observational research at a very basic level. I show them the controlled experiment with the marshmallow experiment, but they love that. But then we talk about some of these other examples of what observational research might look like, and then make it more tangible. So outside of this, formal research context, how are you doing some of these things in your own life, testing out these ideas with observational research? These are how I have them organize their field notes. And I pulled this from Evergreen State College, and you can go back and take a look at this if you'd like. And then I actually have the students go out and use that template to observe within our own institution. Now, on a future slide, I was going to talk about what the challenge of that looks like for online. But I was having my students during class time go out and just observe what's happening in these different buildings, who works there, who's interacting, et cetera. And use the field notes to kind of feel that out. Then we talk about the research questions, as I mentioned. And then we actually do go out for our workplace visits. And then at the end, similar to CUNY Gutman, I have the students do workplace issue presentations where they focus on particular issues that relate to a discipline that they're studying. So for example, I have a student that did some work with that Gabriel Hernandez, I believe, case, and what that looks like, the impact of that for liability with social workers. I thought that was such a cool topic that she came up with. And I have a library session with our faculty librarians where we talk through what are some of these questions that we could ask about the fields that we're looking into. What are the challenges and opportunities there? Not just what do these people do on a daily basis, but what are some of the problems that they're going to be looking to solve or things that they might encounter when they get into that field? Because that is the future of work, is solving problems, right? So we have those sorts of conversations. So why observing work in particular? Because we want to give students the social context of work and not just matching their skills, because oftentimes our coverage of career exploration is, hey, take this assessment, you got these skills, they match to these jobs, see what they do, this is how much money you can make, now you need to major in this. Obviously, this conversation broadens that topic a whole lot more and helps students understand where they fit into organizations in a different way. I talked about some of these other issues here, so I will hop forward. So revisiting my big goals, I have found personally, and I'm not going to go through each one of these at the moment because we're so limited, but I have found that these conversations that I've been able to have with students and pushing them to think about how they're observing their world and observing these workplaces has helped to make each one of these goals less lofty and more tangible. So I personally, as a faculty member, have felt more satisfied using this curriculum than some of the more traditional first-year seminar type of curriculum that you might see. And some lessons learned through initial adoption. I see that we're 5 minutes over. Am I still good, Lalisa? Can I cover 2 more?
You're muted,
You can
Lalisa.
cover 2 more, but I have to pop over to another computer and start another event.
Okay.
You can keep going.
All right. Thank you. I'm almost done.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so some lessons that we learned through our initial adoption. So when we were taking students to workplaces, I noticed, and then some students also mentioned it to me, that even though Brookdale is predominantly white, it was glaringly apparent that our workplaces were also that. So there was some of the social justice issues that came up in a different way for the folks at CUNY Gutman, for the students there. Those came up through some other conversations in my classes as well. So, and I talked to career services and said, you know, we really do need to look at our workplaces and our own professional networking to see if maybe we've made connections with employers that look similar to us, so that they, you know, because my colleagues are also Caucasian in the career services department, maybe all of these colleagues look closer to us, and then we're taking our students here and they're not seeing themselves in these workplaces as well. So, I mean, this obviously that issue could be an entire presentation onto itself, but that was something that was learned through our first experience with the workplace visits. Let's see, what else did I want to cover here? Oh, just a couple of statistics from this. So this will be the 3rd fall that this course has been running at Brookdale. In that time, we've had over 80% of the students who have taken it finish the course with an academic plan. We do not have mandatory academic advising at Brookdale, so that is really a big deal for students to have courses plugged in for future semesters into their Web Advisor student planning tool, or even just on a document that they've created for themselves. And then 48% of these undecided students had selected a major and actually changed to that major within 2 weeks after the course ended, which I thought was really cool. And some of those students included in that 48 had selected the liberal arts general major that they were already in, but they were able to explain why, which was part of their academic and career plan as well. So I wanted to highlight that. And then the online only context, just very quickly, there's obviously practical concerns of replicating the workplace visit and observational experience, but I think you can guide students to observe their parents still in workplaces and also in media. So the Ethnographies of Work course that ran over the summer, not the course I taught, but up at CUNY, Mary Gatto was having students even watch the television show The Office to look for some of these same themes and issues, and was using some podcasts and resources like that to do some similar type of work. On a positive note, we have more accurately documented student reflection. So not all of this is IRB approved, take it and plug it into a presentation or a white paper, but it is kind of cool to have a lot more written discussions to go back and reflect on as we're doing this work. And then two other concerns that I have is, what is planning in general? What's that going to look like for our community when we're all in survival mode? So when I have my 7 sections that I'm teaching of this in just 2 weeks, I know that I am, during this pandemic, very much in a day-to-day mode because things change, and I'm trying to be mindful and do yoga and just focus on what I have to get done today. And what does that survival mindset do to impact students' ability to plan out something that's way further down the line that seems a whole lot less accessible at this very moment? Because as it relates to that last question, what is even the future of work? I have female colleagues, not at my institution, people that I grew up with that had jobs and are now leaving those jobs to homeschool. So what does the world of work look like for women in the future? And maybe it goes in a different direction. I mean, there's so many different questions here, and that professional learning community that I'm a part of with the other folks that I had mentioned before, those are some of the conversations that we're having, because that discussion of what the future of work might look like, and does it look like this, what we're doing right now, will obviously impact how we talk to students about professional networking, and the types of skills that they need to be able to develop in order to be successful. So I have
I have to jump onto another web, but I'm sure we will be in touch.
Yes, I just wanted to give you my contact information. Feel free. I look forward to future conversations with you all. Thank you for listening to me go on and on. I obviously am excited about and love this work, so I look forward to a future conversation with you. Thanks, Sheila. So I know that we're out of time, but if anybody else is on the line that has any questions, I'm happy to address them before I log off.
Thank you so much. We got meetings back to back today.
Of course, I know.
Sabrina. Thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah.
And we will be in touch with you. We'll probably talk on Friday, Sabrina, if that's possible.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All that we can share.
Yes.
We'll share away.
All right, great. I look forward to it. If you need me as backup, I'm in.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sabrina. All right. Thank you. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. You do the
Bye.
same.